No. No, no, no.
What?
No, 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 no,
What?
no, don't do that! I thought we were having a nice date!
We are. Sit
Why
down.
does it matter? I thought we were having a nice
We are.
date!
We are.
To say that I love this movie would be an incredible understatement. To put it frankly, I am completely obsessed with Obsession. It's literally like somebody broke a one-wish willow and wished that I love this movie more than anything in the world. And suddenly I'm this new person that went from knowing nothing about this movie to watching it 3 times in the past 24 hours. This movie has been out for a month and some days at the time of this recording. The first time I went to see this was yesterday with one of my best friends. I knew most of the scenes before going in, but I didn't know them in order. What I did know was what was coming. My buddy did not. Had I not known the scenes, this movie would have terrified me. My buddy thought it was good. I became fucking obsessed with it. Then I went with my cousin today. I brought him, and he said it was like a comedy. He was scared, but he did say it was like a comedy. I was just growing more and more obsessed with this movie the more I watched it. I drove him home, and I drove right back to the movie theater. I parked in the parking lot, and pulled out my phone, and bought a ticket for the very next showing. I had like 16 minutes to get into the theater before the movie began. And I remember sitting in my car thinking, what the hell am I doing? Just go home. Just go home. It's the same fucking movie you just watched. But something was pulling me back. It's like it was begging me to come back. Like it had something that I hadn't seen before. But I had. That's something this movie does incredibly well. It rips your agency out. Not necessarily yours, but it shows you what it could be like. This review is going to have spoilers, but I'm going to make sure to put a timestamp down in the description and the pinned comment. But if you haven't seen this movie yet, in theaters specifically before it goes to streaming, you are missing out. It is a movie that you have to see in the movie theater. It is that good. Before I get into the story itself, I need to explain why this movie affected me the way it did. When most people think of horror, they think of jump scares, creepy creatures, blood, gore, and things that, just go bump in the night. Obsession is an interesting movie because it has literally every single one of those elements. But that's not what makes it terrifying. What makes it terrifying is the premise. This movie presents a fate so horrifying, so deeply unsettling, that I found myself thinking about it long after the credits rolled. I wasn't lying awake in my bed hours after because I was afraid of a monster lurking in the shadows. I was thinking about Nikki. Because the more I thought about what happened to her, the worse it became. And that's exactly where I think Obsession succeeds more than any other horror movie I have ever seen in my life. Nikki Freeman is the definition of the girl next door. She's kind, caring, loyal to her friends, and full of life. More importantly, she feels like a real person. She isn't a classic horror icon like Jason Voorhees, Michael Myers, or Freddy Krueger. She isn't some exaggerated movie character created solely to move the plot forward. She's literally a normal young woman with her own ambitions, her own struggles, her own friendships, and her own life. That's what makes her so compelling. And to be completely honest, that's largely thanks to Indy Navarrette's performance. The entire cast delivers, but Navarrete absolutely steals the show. Every scene she's in feels authentic, whether she's portraying Nikki at her happiest, her most vulnerable, or her most terrifying. I don't know what award season will look like, but if her performance isn't being talked about, something has gone wrong. She carries the emotional weight of this film on her shoulders, and she pulls it off brilliantly. The reason Navarrete succeeds is that she never lets you forget that there's a real person underneath everything that's happening. That might sound obvious, but it's one of the most important aspects of the entire film. In many horror movies, characters exist to serve the story. They are victims, obstacles, or body counts. They are literally pieces being moved around a board. Nikki genuinely never feels that way. She feels real, like somebody you know, somebody you worked with, somebody you've gone to school with, somebody that you've met literally 100 times before. And because of that, every moment in this film carries weight. The cinematography reinforces that feeling. The camera often lingers on characters longer than you expect it to. It allows conversations to breathe. It allows emotions to sit with the audience rather than rushing to the next scare. Obsession isn't interested in startling you every 5 minutes. It wants you to sit with the discomfort. Obsession understands that silence can often be more powerful than noise. Rather than relying on constant jump scares and loud musical strings, the film wants you to feel the tension building beneath the surface. And slowly, almost without realizing it, the movie hooks into you. That's where this movie excels. It trusts the viewer. It trusts its story. And most importantly, it trusts its characters. The result is a film that slowly works its way under your skin. Not all at once, not through shock, not through gore, but through a growing sense of unease that becomes impossible to ignore. By the time the credits rolled, I wasn't thinking about the special effects. I wasn't thinking about the jump scares. I wasn't even thinking about the horror. I was thinking about the people. Nikki, Bear, Ian, Sarah. And that's when I realized this movie had affected me differently than any other horror movie ever has. Most horror movies end when the credits roll. Obsession didn't. It followed me home. Now, before I continue, this is your final warning. If you haven't seen the movie yet, stop watching right now. Go see it, and then come back. I'll be right here. Because from this point forward, we're going to talk about Nikki Freeman. We're going to talk about Bear. And we're going to talk about how obsession is the perfect example of why you should always be careful about what you wish for. I think we've all had a crush at one point in our lives. And to say that none of us have ever silently wished that they liked us back would be insane. It's human. But what if that wish came true? What if you worded the wish wrong? That's the question that obsession answers. And the answer it gives is absolutely terrifying. Imagine that you're living your normal life, hanging out with your friends after a long day at work, making plans for the future, worrying about the same things everyone else worries about. Then the person you trust most, the person you love like a sibling, makes a wish. A wish that changes everything. Suddenly you're not yourself anymore. You're the thing they wish for. You still look the same. You still sound the same. But you're not you. And that is the tragedy at the heart of obsession. One of the most interesting things about this film is that we never truly know Nikki. We know Bear. We know his house, his routines, his grief with Sandy. We know his fears. But Nikki remains just out of touch. We never see inside her home. We never see who she is when nobody else is around. We never see the version of Nikki that exists beyond Bear's perspective. And that's not an accident. Because if Bear truly knew Nikki, we as the viewer would too. In the opening scene, Ian tells Bear that all he has is time. Moments later, we see Sandy dead on the floor after getting into oxycodone. It's the first example of a theme that appears throughout the entire film. Time. Bear didn't have as much time with Sandy as he thought he did. He cleans up the scene, places her into a garbage bag, and tries to move forward. Then, we see him break down on the bed. He's quietly scrolling through Nikki's Instagram. He's already liked a few pictures. It's clear he's obsessed with Nikki. That sequence is important because it's one of the first times the audience gets an unfiltered look at who Bear is. Not who he wants people to think he is, who he actually is. A man struggling with grief, loss, and the feeling that time is slipping away from him. Then Nikki calls. She tells him that she's planning to put in her 2 weeks' notice at the job they both work at. Another clock starts ticking. Another countdown begins. During their conversation, Nikki accidentally drops her crystal necklace down the drain. It's a small moment, the kind of thing most people would forget by the next day. But for Bear, it becomes an opportunity. An opportunity to do something nice for Nikki. An opportunity to get closer to her. An opportunity to matter. But is he doing it for Nikki? Or is he doing it for himself? Moments later, the film lingers on a clock hanging on Bear's wall. Fittingly, it's a cat. Again, time. Again, loss. Again, the feeling that something is slipping through Bear's fingers. We then follow Bear to the Green Man magic shop, filled with magical trinkets, voodoo dolls, crystals, and eventually, the One Witch Willow itself. Even here, the film continues to hammer home the theme of time. The cashier tells Bear he'll have to be quick because they're closing soon. It's another countdown, and another clock ticking. While looking at crystal necklaces, the cashier explains their meanings. Amethyst is used for calmness and clarity. Rose quartz attracts love, and as the cashier eloquently puts it, love and shit. Citrine is described as sunshine in a rock. Bear tries one on and immediately says, Nikki would hate that. It's a brief line, but it's a very important line, because throughout the film, Bear believes he understands Nikki. He believes he knows what she'd like, what she'd dislike, how'd she think. And at first, the audience believes it too. But as the story progresses, we begin to realize something that Bear never does. Knowing someone isn't the same as understanding them. And nobody understands Nikki less than Bear. Bear's attention is eventually drawn to a small novelty item sitting on the shelf, the One Wish Willow. The conversation that follows is both funny and disturbing on a rewatch. Not because it's scary, but because of how casually it's presented. The cashier warns Bear, just don't come back complaining. Bear laughs it off, assuming people get upset because it just doesn't work, like it's a gag gift. The cashier gives a sassy and almost offended laugh before replying, or they died, or they wish they had. On a first viewing, the line feels strange, uncanny, weird for a cashier in a regular shop to say. On a second viewing, it feels like a warning, one that should have been printed on the box itself. By the third viewing, it feels like the entire film condensed into a single sentence. What's interesting is that Bear originally enters the shop with a completely different goal. He's there to buy a gift for Nikki, a crystal necklace. Something personal, thoughtful, something that shows he was paying attention. And the irony is that Nikki probably would have appreciated it. Not because she secretly loved Bear, not because it would have changed their relationship, but because it was a genuine gesture from a friend. Instead, Bear leaves with the One Wish Willow, an item that feels completely out of place compared to the gift he originally intended to buy. One gift asks nothing in return. The other is built entirely by desire. An object built around wanting something you don't or can't have organically. We then head to trivia night, where Bear, Ian, Sarah, and Nikki are sitting around a table. Nikki and Sarah are talking about work, while Bear and Ian engage in one of the funniest exchanges in the entire film, silently mouthing words to each other from across the table. Bear is desperately trying to get Ian and Sarah away from the table so he can just have a small little moment alone with Nikki. Ian, on the other hand, is absolutely determined to make sure that doesn't happen. It's genuinely a funny scene, but it's also a really important one. Because scenes like this are what make the horror work later. For most of its runtime, Obsession feels real. These people feel like real friends. They joke with each other, they tease each other, they have real history together. And because of that, the audience becomes invested in them long before anything supernatural happens. Eventually, Nikki notices the exchange and jokingly asks what's going on. The group laughs. It's a funny scene. Nikki offers to get shots. Bear immediately volunteers to go with her, and Nikki happily agrees. From Nikki's perspective, this is just another conversation with a friend. From Bear's perspective, it's an opportunity. And from the audience perspective, it's almost painful to watch, because we know exactly what Bear wants to say. At the bar, the two fall into an easy conversation. They joke, they tease each other, they talk the way close friends talk. Nikki asks Bear what he did today. Still unwilling to tell her about Sandy, he brushes off the question, but Nikki immediately calls him out on it. "You stayed home and watched TV all day," she said. Bear laughs and agrees. It's a small moment, but one that perfectly captures their dynamic. Nikki knows Bear well enough to see through him. Bear, meanwhile, is trying to find the courage to tell her how he feels. Twice he tries. Twice he's interrupted. The first interruption comes from the bartender. Nikki responds with a casual, "4 shots please, babe," then immediately turns her attention back to Bear. It's a tiny detail, but one I completely missed on my first viewing. Because that's who Nikki truly is. She's warm, friendly, approachable. She treats people kindly, not because she wants something from them, but because that's simply who she is. The second interruption comes from Ian, and this one is much more interesting. Ian tells Bear and Nikki that Sarah's dad Carter, the owner of the music shop the four work at, has a gun in the safe. Nikki's taken aback, but Ian immediately realizes what Bear is trying to do. He teases him, literally pushes him, and practically begs him to say it. But Bear doesn't, and that's when Sarah joins them. Before the group have their shots, Nikki asks what they should toast to. Bear says, pretty much defeated, to Sandy. The group have their shots, and the mood immediately changes. An announcement for trivia starting is in the background. It's faint, but it's noticeable. Ian and Nikki run back to the table, leaving Sarah and Bear alone at the bar. Interestingly, Bear didn't drink his shot. He puts the full shot back on the counter, while the other 3 left their empty glasses. Sarah asks why he wanted to toast to Sandy, and he tells her that Sandy died. She doesn't tease him. She doesn't bug him. She puts her hands over her mouth, says how sorry she is, and she hugs him. Bear hugs back, but something's wrong about the hug. It doesn't seem genuine. It's a brief moment, but an important one. Because for perhaps the first time in the film, Bear is given exactly what he needs: compassion. And yet, it's not coming from the person he wishes it was. The group heads outside after losing at trivia. Ian announces that they're going to karaoke, but Nikki immediately shuts the idea down. She says she just wants to go home and sleep. Ian teases her. Nikki refuses. The two go back and forth in the kind of lighthearted argument you'd expect from a close group of friends, until Bear offers to drive Nikki home. It's a small moment, but one that stood out to me more with each rewatch. Nikki almost seems disappointed that Ian isn't going to be the one driving her home, and that he wasn't even the one to offer. At first, it feels insignificant. Later, it makes a lot more sense. Before they leave, Nikki asks if anyone has cash. Sarah takes out a 20 out of her purse and hands it to Nikki. Nikki takes it. Sarah says, "Well, you can't have the whole thing." But Nikki, she says that she's going to pay it back. She walks over to a homeless man and gives it to him. We see Bear smile, like he finds this exchange adorable. It's another small moment, but it's a very important one. The movie repeatedly goes out of its way to show us who Nikki is, not through grand gestures, but through little acts of kindness. As she walks back, Ian jokingly tells Bear, "Get your girl home safe." Nikki immediately responds and turns to Ian, "Ooh, don't say it like that." It's a funny line, but it's also doing a lot of work. The audience knows Bear likes Nikki. Ian knows Bear likes Nikki. Sarah knows Bear likes Nikki. Nikki, on the other hand, doesn't seem to see him that way at all. The two get into Bear's car and begin the drive back to Nikki's place. Along the way, Nikki apologizes for Sandy's death. Bear tries to brush it off at first, but eventually admits that it probably just hasn't hit him yet. The conversation then shifts to Nikki's 2-week notice. Bear asks why she's leaving, and for perhaps the first and only time in the film, Nikki talks openly about what she wants. She wants to write. More specifically, she wants to write a love story. Bear asks if she means romance. Nikki pretty confidently says no. She wants to write a love story. Bear looks confused, and he says, "Isn't that the same thing?" Nikki never answers. She tells him that he is really the only one she can talk to about this, and talking to him isn't like talking to a brick wall. Bear simply says that she is too, and the conversation simply moves on. After watching this film 3 times, that moment isn't there by an accident, because romance and love are not the same thing. Romance is the spark. It's the butterflies in your stomach. It's the excitement of a crush. It's the fantasy. Love is something else entirely. Love is messy. It's uncomfortable. It's built over time. It's learning who somebody really is, flaws and all, and choosing them anyway. And that distinction sits at the very heart of this film. Because Bear spends the whole movie chasing romance. The conversation continues, and Bear finally tells Nikki he has a gift for her. Nikki's reaction catches him off guard. Not because she's angry, not because she's offended, but because she reacts the way someone might react if their sibling told them they bought them something special. There's an awkwardness to it, a discomfort. The subject changes almost immediately. Eventually, they arrive at Nikki's house, and what's fascinating is that Nikki is clearly ready to go inside. She's tired. She's had a long day. She just wants to go home and sleep. Bear, meanwhile, keeps searching for an opening. First, he brings up their old gym teacher, talking about the time Nikki gave him her only mouthpiece. Nikki doesn't look enthused, and just says plainly, "You were on thin ice." As she starts to walk away, Bear rolls down the window and yells, "Good night, Freaky Nikki," a nickname Ian had suggested earlier. The problem is that Bear is trying to follow someone else's advice. Ian told him to tease her, to be playful, to be a little mean, to invite romance. Something Bear is clearly uncomfortable doing. Nikki stops, turns around, and for the first time in the scene, she genuinely looks hurt. She questions why he would say that. Bear immediately starts apologizing, and she says, "You know I don't like that." He apologizes again and again. Then Nikki crouches down beside the car window and calmly asks him, "Do you like me? Because if you do, now's the time to say it." It's the very moment Bear has been working toward for the entire film. No interruptions. No Ian. No Sarah. No bartender. Just Nikki giving him the opportunity to be honest. And Bear can't do it. He tells her that they're just good friends. Nikki pauses and then simply says, "Okay, good." And then she heads inside. We hear the door close, and then it's just completely silent. Bear sits there disappointed in himself. He finally got the moment he'd been looking for, and when it arrived, he let it pass. He then reaches into his backpack. He pulls out the One Wish Willow, and everything changes. The box looks like any novelty item you'd find at a joke shop or in a cult store. It's adorned with funny little markings that make it look like any other item you'd buy for a friend. It says, "You only have one wish. Amaze your friends." Bear opens it. A cheerful, haunting jingle plays. He removes the willow branch from the box, adorned with white marks and glossy coating, and he holds it between his hands. And then
I wish Mickey Freeman loved me more than anyone in the fucking world.
Bear breaks the One Wish Willow, and honestly, it's a very human moment. All he really wanted to do was tell Nikki how he felt. Instead, he got scared. So he made a wish. And honestly, it's something we've all done before. Maybe not with a magical willow branch, but we've all wished for things. To ace a test, to get a job, to finally work up the courage to talk to somebody, to have a crush like us back. The difference is that this wish comes true. Almost immediately, Nikki appears on the porch, silhouetted against the light. Bear panics and quickly throws the willow and his backpack into the back seat. When Nikki approaches the window, he awkwardly tells her he was looking up directions. A weird thing to do when this is your friend's house. Then Nikki asks a strange question. "You said you had something for me?" But the gift is gone. Bear already used it. So he tells her he left it at home. And from this point forward, something very clearly is wrong. Nikki invites Bear inside so they can talk about the cat that she just lost. Bear looks extremely confused. "You lost a cat?" Nikki pauses. "Oh, no. I mean your cat." It's the first crack in the illusion. The first moment where the audience realizes that whatever is standing outside that car isn't behaving quite right. And the film wisely doesn't explain why. Bear asks if she's okay. And for the first time of many, we see the real Nikki briefly break through. She looks around, confused. "Whoa, what the fuck? I'm acting so weird." And then it's gone. A few seconds of genuinely hilarious scenes play out as Nikki runs around the car bizarrely, almost animal-like, similar to a puppy or a kitten excited to see its owner whenever it gets home. It's awkward, it's funny, and it's extremely unsettling. Eventually, Nikki gets into the car and asks Bear to drive her back to his place. Again, Bear asks if she's okay. This time, though, Nikki says no. Her dad has cancer. She leans forward, covering her face with her hair, and begins sobbing. And this was the exact moment something felt off to me during my first viewing. I actually leaned over to my best friend and said, "She isn't crying, what the fuck?" The sounds are there. The sobbing is there. But the emotion isn't. Her body isn't moving like somebody who's breaking down would. It feels performed. Artificial. Uncanny. She casually looks up, peering from the side, her hair casting a shadow over her face, almost as if she's checking to see whether Bear believes her story. He does. So, the two return to his house. Inside, Nikki begins wandering around. She makes a comment that it's bigger than his old place. She looks around as if in awe. She smells the air. It smells like you. Bear, understandably weirded out, asks, "Like, bad?" Nikki shakes her head and rushes to the kitchen. "No, just you." Again, this scene is funny. And again, it's extremely uncomfortable. The two eventually make their way into Bear's bedroom. Nikki sits on his bed, crumpled into a depressing hunch, while Bear awkwardly tries to spark a conversation. Take all the space, or time, that you need. Bear attempts to leave the room, but Nikki asks him to stay, to lay with her. Bear hesitates. Still believing she's simply having a rough night, he asks if she's sure. Nikki asks again, not aggressively, not seductively, more like someone looking for comfort. Eventually, Bear agrees. Nikki begins taking off her shirt, and in another funny scene, Bear turns around, taking a deep breath. As he climbs into the bed, Nikki moves closer, and eventually, they begin kissing. Then the film delivers one of its truly effective jump scares, and one of the first of many. Real Nikki suddenly breaks through. The musical strings hit. She jumps away and screams, "What the fuck?" Bear launches himself backwards against the bed frame. "What the fuck was that?" Bear demands in a state of panic. And then, just as quickly, she's gone. Wish Nikki takes over again. She calmly explains it away as a panic attack. The night continues, but Bear can't sleep. He gets off the floor and begins searching online on his laptop. Does the One Wish Willow actually work? The results are exactly what you expect to find on Reddit, or in this case, Threadit. Clever. Some people say yes, some people say no. One review reads, "It definitely works. My mom was ugly and then I used the One Wish Willow and now she's beautiful." Little moments like this are sprinkled throughout the film. Curry and Cooper, the creators of sketch comedy duo That's a Bad Idea on YouTube, clearly have brought their humor to this film as well. Tiny jokes, small absurdities, the kind of things that get a chuckle the first time, but become funnier the more you think about them. Because what do most people wish for? A good grade, a promotion, more money, a successful interview, maybe even for someone to like them back. Most wishes are selfish, not evil, just selfish. Very few people are wishing for world peace, an end to hunger, or a cure to cancer. They're wishing for things that benefit themselves, and that's what makes Bear's situation so interesting. His wish isn't malicious, it's human. Unfortunately for Bear, this is a world where wishes actually come true, and that comes with consequences. Bear eventually closes the laptop and returns to his bedroom. Nikki is sitting upright in the darkness, once again silhouetted by the shadows. Calmly she asks, "Where were you?" Bear dodges the question. Nikki asks if he'll lay with her again. Bear says it's probably not a good idea. Nikki asks again. And again, Bear gives in. After all, since when do wishes come true? Everything happening tonight has an explanation. At least, that's what Bear believes. If Nikki's father having cancer is what brought her here. If this is somehow the opportunity he's always wanted. Who is he to walk away from a friend in need?